Board of Appeals of the City of Newburyport. Our meeting published Tuesday, October 28th, 2025. It being 7:03. We're now live and on the record. I'm going to take a moment to introduce myself. My name is Rob Champetti. I have the privilege of serving as chair of the Newburyport ZBA. To my immediate left is Mr. Ken Swanton, our vice chair. To his left, Mr. Stephen Delisle, our secretary. Then to his left, Mr. Gregory Bennett, member, Mr. Walter Shannon, member, Mr. Larry Ginta, associate member, and Mr. Jared Igerman, associate member. To my immediate right, I have Mr. Gareth Orsman from Pierce Adler. Attorney Orsman is our city solicitor and attorney for purposes of our comprehensive permit application 40B, and will be sitting at tables and participating and guiding as need be. To his immediate right, Mr. Andy Port, our planning director. To his right, Ms. Caitlin Sullivan, our city planner. And to my far right, Ms. Gretchen Joy, our keeper of minutes and note taker. What we typically do is we'll begin by calling the roll, establishing we have a legal quorum to begin. I'll then just list the 5 voting members as is required. With every application, though, 4 are required to vote in the affirmative for any application to be successful. We always have 5 legally voting members. Other members who are not voting but are at tables do participate in every other aspect, including everything, with the exception of actively voting, so deliberations and questions and such. So, calling the roll call of the Newburyport Zoning Board of Appeals for October 28th, 2025. Mr. Swanton. Here. Mr. Delisle. Here. Mr. Beck. Here. Mr. Chin. Here. Mr. Ginta. Present. Mr. Igerman. Here. And I'm here. That is 7 present. Our 5 voting members this evening, unless we otherwise have to specify who recusal or someone who has been absent and wasn't. Evening, the 5 voting members will be Mr. Swanton, Mr. Delisle, Mr. Bennett, Mr. Shannon, and myself. And again, Mr. Ginta and Mr. Igerman will be participating in all other aspects, including deliberations, questions. They just won't be participating in voting. I do want to note that this evening is our member, Mr. Walter Shannon's last evening here at the ZBA. I'm assuming you knew that first, right? I want to make sure everyone understands that's not a passive aggressive way to be like that. You're right. But I understand that after many years, we greatly appreciate your service. Thank you. You'll be sorely missed. We're happy to bring this party to your house, but that might be weird. So, how long, and not to belabor the evening, but I'm just curious, how long have you been on board? 5.5 years. Well, we're personally, and I'm sure I speak for my colleagues, but I'll just speak for me personally. It's been a pleasure, and we're grateful that you're here this evening. And pleasure for me too. Yeah, we'll sorely miss you. But so with that, I'm going to take a moment and just go over for those that might not be familiar with the public hearing. I will do the abridged version. Many of you in the room may be familiar with this sort of what to expect outline, but with respect to a public hearing with the Zoning Board of Appeals, what we typically do, I will begin every public hearing by reading the application by description as it's described in the agenda, and any public notice, any abutter notice by the applicant's name, the address, and then a description of the relief being sought by the applicant, whether they seek a special permit or a special permit for nonconformities or a variance. And then more specifically, detail and just natural language. Just very specifically what the applicant seeks to do. For instance, the applicant seeks all necessary permits to construct a 3-season porch or to partially demolish a wall or whatever the descriptive language is. I'll read that so that it's very clear without anyone in the room needing to have a copy of the agenda in front of them. They'll still understand what it is we're about to undertake. Everything that we do, by the way, is being simultaneously broadcast on the screen to my left. Anyone online that's observing is seeing everything that we see. Anything that's being referenced during a presentation of an application is also going to be up on this board. I do apologize for the distance. I invite anyone who may wish to do so. Please feel free to, if you'd like to move a chair, come closer. We want you to be able to see it. It's unfortunately we can't move the screen, obviously, but This is all available online as well at openpermits.com. I'm sorry, openpermits.gov with the city's website. So everything that we have, we're looking at on our laptops, and it's published right here as well. So I'll read the application, and then we'll invite the applicant to step to the podium, and the applicant or applicant's representatives will present the application. And once they are complete, we'll close that portion of the public hearing and go to public comment. During public comment, I'll ask Ms. Sullivan to put up the slide that shows sort of our placard on public comment rules of the road. We do invite anyone to come to the podium. Please give us your name and address for the record. And then you may simply speak as you see fit with respect to comment. You are welcome and certainly invited to pose your public comment in the form of a question. Please understand, if you choose to do that, it is no intended discourtesy by any of us that we don't directly respond to your question with an answer. That is not an intent to be discourteous, but rather just sort of the procedural method by which we take in that public comment. Rest assured, though, that any public comment that is presented in the form of a question, we will all be taking notes, and you are almost guaranteed to hear some version, if not verbatim, of your question from one of the members of the board during the third segment of our public hearings called Questions from the Board. So just to touch on this, when we do go to public comment, we ask everyone to kindly govern yourselves, with the courtesy toward others who may wish to speak, though we do have the rule of a 2-minute rule. I have the discretion and I exercise it almost universally with respect to allowing folks to, to come to a conclusion of a thought or a comment. I will do my best to try to discreetly signal to you if it's going, extraordinarily long, and that's only out of the interest of making sure that everyone in the room and anyone online who wishes to speak has the opportunity to do so. So once we go through the room for public comment, I'll then go online, and anyone online that's following along can simply just raise their hand virtually. We'll recognize them virtually and invite them to unmute their mic. We'll do the same, and then we ask the same rules of just name and address. And if you wish to speak in favor of or in opposition to, you may characterize your comments that way. You are not required to. You don't have to be pro or con. You can simply rise, share your thoughts with us as you see fit, and we are eager to hear you. Once we get through questions, once we get through public comment and then go to questions from the board, any member of the board may have questions that are born of the presentation, born of public comment, born of their own query and interest or question or confusion. We will vet any and all questions from the board of the applicant or applicant's representatives. Once we've exhausted that, we'll close that portion and go to the final portion of our public hearing called deliberations. That's when members of the ZBA will, in full view, both eye and ear, in public view as well as online, essentially deliberate out loud over the legal criteria by which we as a board must run the information we've heard, whether the applicant and the applicant's presentation has met with the legal criteria and the elements of that criteria for the relief that they seek, whether they've met the criteria for a special permit, a variance, or a special permit for non-conformance. We will, of course, share with you what that criteria is as part of the deliberations. Once we get through that, we'll close that final portion, and then I will invite a motion from any member of the ZBA, which must be seconded before it can be voted upon. In the form of Robert's Rules of Order, that motion is always offered in the affirmative, which means you'll hear it in the form of a member of the ZBA will make a motion to approve. Please note that that does not necessarily mean that ZBA member plans to support or does support or plans to vote in favor of that motion, but merely the procedural mechanism by which it's placed on the floor for a second, and then once it's made and seconded, I'll call the roll. And in order for the application to be successful, 4 of the 5 voting members must vote yes. If 4 of the 5 voting members vote yes, the motion carries and the application is approved. That's essentially the lay of the land, ladies and gentlemen. I always take this indulgence, and I thank you for your patience, just so that anyone who might be new to this public process has an idea of what to expect and an idea as to the work. Without further ado, we're going to get into our public hearings. This first matter is the matter of Salvador A. Micheli. Did I say that right? Thank you. This is 24 Harding Avenue. This is a continuation from October 14th, 2025. We've noted it as first out because it's we anticipate it to be brief enough to do first. That's not any compulsion on you to be brief, but it's just, that's how we docketed it. This is a special permit for nonconformities. The applicant is seeking to demolish the existing home and build a new single-family home on a non-conforming lot. And this is again 24 Harding Avenue. Sir? Yes, please.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Salvatore Jelly, 24 Harding Ave. I think tonight is the process for the new construction of this home. I think we addressed the final 3 issues that we had in the previous meeting. Turn it over to the architect who will walk through it.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Oscar Flores. I live at 205 Nicar Avenue in Revere. And I'm just going to go quickly through the slide to see the changes that we did after we heard all the comments from the neighbors and also for the boards in the last previous meetings. So this is also facade for the building. Go to the third slide. This is the location. This one is the proposed lot. And what we did is basically we reduced the depth of the building from 2 feet initially from the last meeting, and we came down to like 48. Also, we reduced the garage size from 2 cars to one side of one car garage. Going to the next slide. So by reducing the size of the lot, also like we increase per se the setbacks. The front remains the same because we wanted to keep the same line of the neighbor houses. We go to the next slide. Now on this slide, the next one. This one, we can see that we lower the roof of the garage just to make it less massing. We try to do like more symmetrical facade. And the height of the proposed building still is 22 feet, I believe 6 or 8 inches from the original that used to be 18 feet. We can go to the next slide. This is the new floor layouts, taking some of the comments from the board and the neighbors. We reduced the garage. We reduced the depth of the building as well. Next slide. These are some of the side elevations. Next slide, please. Actually, we can go to the following one. Rendering. These are like some of the rendering displaying some of the landscape we wanted to propose, the lines and the typology of the house, trying to keep a good language of the next door houses. And the next slides, this is a comparison of the typology of the houses in Harding Avenue on the eastern side of the street. So we propose a 1.5 story house, which we are increasing only by 4 feet from the existing structure. Next slide, please. And these are some of the that we use in order to get and find the typology and all the mathematics. That will complete the slide presentation.
Okay, that's the presentation. Thank you for that. We'll close the revisit presentation. Just because we're going into additional detail, I'm going to go to public comment again in the event there is any, and then we'll go to questions from the board. Members of the audience and anyone online, with respect to presentation and revision material that the applicant has just presented, 24 Harding Ave. Anyone in the room, wish to speak in connection with this application? Yes.
Mayor July 33 Elmira. I am a butter to this property, and I just actually really just want to say thank you to the applicant for taking all the concerns of the neighbors into consideration, and to revising the design to be more in character and keeping with the neighborhood. So our appreciation.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? Seeing no hands in the room, any hands online? Anyone who wishes to speak online? We have 10 attendees online, seeing no hands online. One last pass in the room, no hands. I'll close, public comment and questions from the board. Any questions with respect to, with respect to the changes that we asked the applicant to make? Closing questions, deliberations. Again, we're deliberating the criteria for a special permit for non-conformities. Who wants to lead off? I'll start. Thank you.
This matter has been before us a number of times. We vetted it quite thoroughly, and I think that the process resulted in an application which is much more in keeping with the size and scale of the neighborhood, and I applaud the applicant for doing that. That being said, there's no non-conformity. I find that this application is consistent with the neighborhood, and it does not create a substantial difference with respect to their neighborhood. So for all those support.
Thank you, Mr. Beck. Anything further? All right, there are no further deliberations. We have a motion.
I would move that the application for
Special condition proposed.
Yes. We should include. I think at the last meeting, we discussed potential special conditions. Did we frame the special? It's a street tree. Yeah. However you wish to frame it.
I don't have it in front of me here, so maybe I'll wait.
Yeah, with motion to approve special permit for nonconformities for 24 Harding Avenue with the following special condition: that the applicant shall install one new street tree and shall consult the tree warden to determine the exact location, appropriate size and species of the new tree. The improvements shall be completed prior to occupancy permit. In extenuating circumstances, including but not limited to seasonal constraints, an alternative deadline for compliance hereby may be submitted to and approved at the sole discretion of the zoning administrator. The applicant shall be responsible for the care and maintenance, including adequate watering of all new tree plantings within the right of way installed as part of this project for 2 years following initial planting in order to ensure their successful plant and survival. If any of such 2-year period, they shall be replaced in kind. And that is our motion.
Second,
I'll second.
I'll second that.
motion made by Mr. Lyle with one condition and seconded by Mr. Bennett. Calling the roll, Mr. Swan.
I think I listened here last time. I think I'll let the person who was.
Okay. Mr. Bly,
Yes.
Mr. Bennett,
Yes.
Mr. Shannon.
Yes.
And our voting member will be Mr. Ginta, I believe.
No.
No, I'm sorry.
No, he missed the last meeting.
Right.
I vote yes.
And I vote yes, that's 5 in the affirmative, the ayes have it. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes, 5 in the affirmative, the ayes have it, motion carries. Thank you, gentlemen, for revisiting the concerns of the neighborhood and concerns of the board.
Thank you.
Have a good evening. Good luck.
Good.
Okay, moving to our next application on the agenda. This is a continuation, Port Plaza Realty Trust, care of Lisa Mead, Tower and Acosta.
Mr. Chair, we have a couple of continuance requests. Do you want to say?
You know what? That's right. We do. Thank you for reminding me. My apologies. We usually take on continuances so that folks aren't sitting here for the entirety of the first matter is the application of Charles Griffin, 10.5 Auburn Street. This is a continuation from June 10th, 2025, July 8th, and August 12th. This is a variance to allow a short-term rental unit on a parcel adjacent to the owner's primary residence.
Good evening, thank you. Jeff Roloff, attorney for the applicant, 44 Merrimack Street, Newburyport. We've submitted a continuance request to January 13th. As we noted in the request, we're looking for more time to address the preservation restriction issues that came up. We discussed this briefly at the last meeting. We need more time to discuss those, review them. We're waiting for Mass Historic Commission input on the PR form that was approved previously locally by the Newburyport Historic Commission. I'm also proposing to come before the ZBA on November 25th. To have an informal discussion with the board to give you a more full, complete update on what these PR issues are, what the procedural posture is, and then we can talk about the best next steps for taking care of them. So the continuance request is to January 13th. We're for a vote on that tonight, and then just a side commitment for me to be here on November 25th to discuss the PR status.
So the question I have is what the mechanism would be to have you come back before us any earlier? We put Attorney Willoff's and this client on the agenda, or?
I think what we're talking about here is revisiting the from the prior permit condition, just the preservation restriction element. So we would see that perhaps under the general business discussion.
Okay, we can do that.
Yeah, and we, just to be clear, we would not be discussing this pending STRU variance application on November 25th.
Right.
At all.
Very good.
Yeah.
Okay, so we will, so we're looking at, did you say November 25th for that informal, that business meeting?
Related to the PR, January 13th for the continuance request for the pending application.
Got it, thank you. All right, so the applicant's request is to continue with those two caveats to January 13th with an interim visit on the business during the business meeting, limited in scope to the PR matters on November 25th. There's a so moved. Thank you, Mr. Swanton. And do we have a second? Mr. Shannon. Motion made by Mr. Swanton, seconded by Mr. Shannon. It's his last time. Give him a couple. Give him a few more points on the board. Calling the roll, Mr. Swanton.
Yes.
Mr. Bennett.
Yes.
Mr. Chen.
Yes.
And Mr. Kidd. No.
Yes.
We just had. Mr. Ackerman.
You went back there.
He's refused.
I think she's recused. And I vote Mr. Gibson.
Yeah.
And I vote yes. That is 5 in the affirmative. The ayes have it. Continuance is approved. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll see you, your client then.
Thank you.
The next continuation on our agenda is the application of Linda Sobdowski, and forgive me if I mispronounce your last name. This is 9 Bromfield Street, a continuation from 8/12/2025 to begin September 23rd, 2025. This is a special permit for nonconformities to remove the existing roof line and create a new third floor above the existing second floor, extending upward as a non-conforming front and yard and side yard setback. I don't know if we have anyone from the applicant here this evening. But we can take it on the applicant's request to continue to, did they give us a?
Yeah, November 25th, 2025.
Okay, the applicant has made the request on the papers for November 25th, 2025. Do we have any comment? And if not, do we have a motion? So moved. Thank you, Mr. Swanton. Second, Mr. Chairman. Motion is made by Mr. Swanton and seconded by Mr. Chen, and calling the roll, the motion to continue to November 25th. Mr. Swanton?
Yes.
Mr. Bennett?
Yes.
Mr. Chen?
Yes.
Mr. Ginta?
Yeah.
And I vote yes. The ayes have it. Motion carries. Matter is continued. That matter is continued to the 25th. Okay, coming back up to our next application or continuation on our agenda. This is the application or the continuation of Port Plaza Realty Trust, care of Lisa Mead B. Tellerman and Costa, 45 Story Avenue. This is a continuation of a comprehensive permit pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 40B, for the construction of 212 total residential units on one building, continued from July 22nd, August 26th, September 23rd, and September 30th.
Mr. Chair, I'll be recusing myself.
Very good. Mr. Ginta is recusing himself this application. That will change our voting members. And is Mr. Swanton? Oh, you're not.
No.
So that means our 5 voting members are going to slightly change. What we'll do is the 5 voting members for the continuation of 40B, the 40B application will be myself, Mr. Swanton, Mr. Delisle, Mr. Bennett, and Mr. Igerman. Mr. Shannon is already recused by virtue of under 40B, any member of the ZBA who is unfortunately unable to be present for two meetings is no longer able to participate and vote as part of that. So that had already happened unavoidably by Mr. Shannon. So our 5 voting members in the continuation of this 40B will be, again, Mr. Swanton, Mr. Delisle, Mr. Bennett, Mr. Igerman, and myself. Okay, so just to refresh, ladies and gentlemen, for purposes of this application, as it's an ongoing comprehensive permit application, we have come to describe the subject matter silos or pillars of the detail that we take on any given evening as a continuation and progression through that subject matter. We have through previous evenings dealt with traffic and parking, drainage engineering, which includes hydrotech, geotech, and all matters related to drainage and engineering. We will be continuing the further refinement of both of those subject matter verticals this evening through the applicant's experts as well as the peer review experts that are enlisted and retained on behalf of the city and on behalf of the board. It is with aspiration that the ZBA will endeavor to be able to move on to the 3rd subject matter pillar that we plan to do, which would be architectural and design this evening. So the goal would be to get into that subject matter. We would have full public comment and questions, and all of that would be related to any new subject matter vertical that we undertake. With that, I also want to give the floor for a moment to Attorney Horstman. Last week, I want to, as is incumbent upon me as the chair, to report any working sessions with respect to the ongoing technical detail by and between technical experts of the ZBA and the applicant under 40B, specifically through guidance by the Chapter 40B Handbook for Zoning Board of Appeals dated March 2017. This is a publication published to zoning boards of appeal throughout the Commonwealth by the Massachusetts Housing Partnership. There is a term of art referred to as a work session. Work session is a technical session that is undertaken for purposes of streamlining, refining, advancing the collaboration by and between and the expertise by and between the applicant with respect to subject matter verticals and the board's technical consultants, so as to make best use of time and to continue traction forward. I'm going to turn the floor over for a moment to our counsel just to provide the legal and sort of better explanation of what a work session is. And then, as is best practice and is required under that handbook, I, as the chair, am disclosing this evening that the subject matter of that work session that was undertaken for a 2-hour block on Monday, the 20th. I've also asked our planning director to prepare a memorandum so that the public would be availed as further, effort and practice toward best practice to provide a summary of the substance of that work session as is recommended and I believe as is required by any, I think, fair-minded time to continue, full transparency and full disclosure. I've asked Mr. Port to put this memorandum on file, this afternoon, which is now available at, openpermits.gov. And it outlines the details of the technical subject matter, which was limited to traffic mitigation, as well as erosion control and measures of stormwater. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Attorney Horstman, and then we'll get into our subject matter.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chair, I'll be brief. I was just asked about the propriety of a working session. In my experience, are pretty common in 40B. Application, because of the immense amount of material you're trying to get through in a 180-day period, the statute requires that you open and close a hearing within 180 days. These projects tend to be large, and complicated, and so the work session was a process by which one or two board members could observe the technical consultants actually interact and maybe make some headway on technical issues. And it's been endorsed by, as the chair refers to, a Chapter 40B handbook for zoning boards of appeal. That was published by the Massachusetts Housing Partnership, which is one of the subsidizing agencies that generally oversees 40B process, along with what was then Department of Housing and Community Development, now the Executive Office of Living and Community, Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, as well as Mass Housing and Mass Development, all subsidizing agencies and overseeing agencies in 40B process. The guidebook or the handbook is not law. It provides best practices, much like engineers would follow best management practices. In this case, best practices are no more than two members of the board be present. So it's not a quorum, it's not a public meeting. One of those members only acts in an observatory capacity, just to oversee and validate. And the other may participate somewhat in the process, but the gist of it is really to have some observation of the technical consultants interacting. That is what happened Monday. So the other best practice is that after that session is concluded, it'll be made public and presented in some kind of a summary or memorandum, and that has been done here as well. And the chair has summarized it, and it is also available for anyone to view. So that is my summary of the work session process. If anyone has any questions, please.
Thank you, Attorney Horstman. And just to end cap that, I wish to just disclose, though it's also outlined in the memorandum, the observatory member was myself, and the participating member of the ZBA was Mr. Lyle. All of the details are outlined here with that spirit and best practice in mind. To the extent to which any future work session may be needed, we would seek to follow the same best practice or some evolution to hopefully perhaps even improve upon best practice. But with that now disclosed, I'd like to return the floor to the applicant, Attorney Mead, to pick up where we have left off. And to the extent there are any new experts or professionals, if you could just introduce them for us so that we know who we'll be hearing from.
Sure. Thank you, Chair and members of the board. For the record, Lisa Mead, Midtown Cost 30 Green Street, Newburyport. With me this evening is the principal of the applicant, Richard Kaplan, in addition to our peer review expert, which I'm going to talk about. So as the chair indicated, we've made some progress with regards to traffic. So you're going to hear from Jeff Dirk of VAI, who's our peer review expert tonight. He submitted materials to the board at the board's request. There was a matrix that the board wanted to be prepared, and one additional column was added to that matrix as a result of the work session. Your expert, Kevin from TEC, is here tonight to talk about that as well. And so they will both discuss that. In addition, and namely with regards to the pedestrians crossing on Low Street, I think that's the big outstanding issue. We also hear related to civil. I think we've pretty much, I believe, wrapped up the civil aspect. I don't believe your expert is able to be here this evening, but Randy Myron from Bowler Engineering is here to review the last and final, I believe, a technical review by Mr. Christensen. His plan will show you that we have employed the out of the the westerly egress out of the garage, the forced right turn, and he'll show how that has happened. He'll show you the movements of the truck turning up the main entrance and a more specific or easier to read, if you will, pedestrian crossings throughout the shopping plaza, and a couple of other items, and importantly, how the applicant has met the state stormwater standard. And then finally, we have received last week the peer review for architecture, so we're able to get that to that. Ed is here this evening to talk about, Ed Bradford, to talk about our response to that. We don't have revised plans, but we do talk about what we're gonna do. And I believe that your peer review architect is here as well. So with that, and without further ado, I'm gonna turn it over to Jeff to present the materials that you provided.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. For the record, Jeffrey Durkin, he had mentioned, and I think as the chair had gone through kind of a working session that we had, one of those topics did deal with this pedestrian crossing of Long Street. That is going to be the focus of my presentation tonight is on that pedestrian crossing. I think as we left the last public hearing, what we were looking at is ways of controlling the pedestrian crossing just to the east of where the driveway was. And the purpose of the additional analysis that was done was to look at 3 alternative traffic control features. And the working session that the chair had mentioned, part of that was to make sure that as we delivered some performance metrics or matrix for the board to consider, we wanted to make sure that we try to incorporate elements that would be of substance, but also things that would be categories that the board may want to weigh as they look at these alternative measures. So that's all been incorporated in a matrix that we'll go through with you in a minute. Andy, if you could advance, actually go through a couple of slides. I have some holdover slides just in case we need to go through those. The board's very familiar with the project site shown here. The yellow is where the building is going to be located. And just about where you see the word site, across from that on Low Street is where the crossing is that we're talking about. And it's at the center driveway. Next. Just to remind the board of the traffic characteristics, and I'm pointing this out because one of the things that the matrix is going to look at is how many additional vehicles is this project adding across the proposed crossing? Because as we're talking about safety, it's looking at not only what's happening there today in terms of existing crossing, the existing vehicles going across the crossing in relation to the pedestrian volumes, but also what are we adding to those crossing volumes, both from a pedestrian perspective, but also the automobiles that interact with those pedestrians. So you remember from the prior presentations, the project in total is producing about 73 vehicle trips over the course of an hour. And we have 3 driveways on Low Street, and then we have the driveways also off of Story Avenue. So the trips are dispersed between those points, but most of the traffic is using the Low Street entrances and exits. Next slide, Ian. This is that distribution. So the focus as we look at concentration of traffic along Low Street, pointing out what we're showing on the slide here is again, going back to that metric of about 83% of the trips are expected to be oriented to and from Low Street. And as we look at this distribution of trips, what you see is that 28% of the traffic that is oriented to and from the east, that is a volume of traffic that does not interact with the crosswalk. I think that's very important as we're looking at added vehicles going across that. So the 28% doesn't go through the crossing. And we'll see some numbers as we look at the matrix in terms of the additional crossings of vehicles across where the crosswalk is. The other thing that's important is one of the changes, as you heard Attorney Mead mention that we made to the site plan is, if you recall from the last hearing, we had committed to no exits from the project's driveway onto the center driveway. We have this change actually beneficial as it relates to circulation, but also beneficial in terms of removing some traffic from Low Street is allowing the right turn exit only allows for people exiting the site that they're destined to Story Avenue. They don't need to come up into Low Street, come up to the signal and turn right. So that has a positive benefit in terms of reducing some impacts on Low Street. It also has a positive benefit as it relates to the operation of the traffic signal at Low Street and Story Avenue, because we're not adding trips that don't need to be there. So again, a benefit as it relates to the project. Next slide, please. This slide is you had seen before is really, I think, in response to some of the questions that the board had in terms of distribution of traffic. But just a couple of things as I want to point out as it relates to Low Street, because we're going to talk about this in a minute at the matrix.
So there's no increase in traffic in terms of exiting the Low Street driveway or center driveway to Low Street. So that number is 0. There's no added traffic coming out of that driveway toward Low Street. As it relates to the left turn movement going into the plaza from the center driveway, the project will add roughly about 22 vehicles. It actually ranges between 8 and 22, so 22 is the maximum that we're adding to the left turn movement. It's 1 added vehicle every 2.5 minutes, so not significant. Through traffic towards Story Avenue will increase by about 31 vehicles, which is 1 added vehicle every 2 minutes. And really the point of this is that we're not adding a significant volume of traffic to Low Street, either as it relates to through volume, but also the turning movement volumes at that center driveway. And again, no exiting traffic at that. Next slide. So now in terms of the new information, I do apologize that some of this is small. We're going to blow up the slides in a minute as we look at each of the options. So as was requested by the board, what we did is look at, again, I think what we want to talk about is what is the purpose of what we're evaluating. So the purpose of the matrix and what we've been asked to evaluate is what is potential traffic control measures for the crossing. So it's really related not so much to the center driveway, but what the request was, what the evaluation was, is what are different types of control measures for the crossing that can introduce a level of safety beyond just having a crossing with no control features. And so the 3 traffic control features that were evaluated were the signalized intersection, a pedestrian hybrid beacon, which is also known as a hawk signal. There's 2 options as it relates to the hawk signal. And then the last option that we evaluated was the rectangular rapid flashing beacon, which is the flashing light switch. You press the button to cross the intersection itself. So the matrix looks at each of those crossing alternatives. At the top of the matrix are 6 criteria that we evaluated to look at each of those crossing alternatives. So in terms of looking at those criteria, first was cost, which really isn't a significant factor as it relates to the benefit to the safety of that crossing. The next criteria is looking at whether there's a 5-foot shoulder provided or not provided. And then the next criteria is the left turn lane. Is there a left turn lane afforded by either of the options, or is there not? And then you look at whether these devices are actually warranted. So as it relates to the traffic signal or the pedestrian hybrid beacon, there are criteria that have to be met. For the rectangular rapid flashing beacon, there are not. So it's basically engineering judgment, and as practicing professionals, we look at what is an appropriate crossing treatment based on speed of the roadway, volume of traffic on the roadway, and the number of pedestrian crossings that are happening. But for the hybrid beacon and for the signal, there are warrants that have to be met, and those warrants are set by the Federal Highway Administration. They're adopted by Mass DOT. And as the chair was mentioning, in terms of best practices, as engineers, we use those documents, even if this is not a state highway, it's on a city street. Low Street is under city jurisdiction, so the city ultimately has the say in terms of what device is installed. However, best practices are you look at the Mass DOT guidance, you look at the Federal Highway Administration guidance, and then we provide recommendations for the city to consider. So as we looked at each of these alternatives, we looked at, again, all of those criteria. And then at the bottom of the table, we looked at what the impacts of these devices would be in terms of pedestrian safety, but also as it relates to a motorist on Low Street. Because as you heard, in terms of the impacts of the project, not a significant impact, but as we start to introduce positive traffic control features, and positive being that we're controlling the flow of traffic along the Low Street, that has ramifications. And I think as both myself and the peer review consultant have talked about positive traffic control, there are positives and benefits. The detriment to it really being what it does to flow of traffic along Low Street, and then backups. And as professionals, again, we need to consider those backups in relation to safety, but also how it relates to the signal of Story Avenue. So we've taken that into consideration as we look at each of these alternatives. Andy, you want to see? So now I'm going to look at each of these alternatives that we evaluated and go with the signal to the hybrid beacon to the rectangular rapid flashing beacon. So the first criteria, or the first alternative, was the traffic signal alternative. So this is probably the most significant traffic control feature in terms of providing positive control. So this controls not only pedestrians, it controls vehicles at the intersection as well. So it is probably, as I said, it's the most significant in terms of impedance of flow, but also most positive in terms of traffic control of the crossing itself. And so as we look at the criteria as we relate to it, if a signal was installed at the center driveway, you would have 5-foot shoulders, you would have a left turn lane, because if you are going to go through the expense of installing a traffic signal, you build it properly with the turn lanes, with the shoulders, so that it meets all of the design criteria. This device, as we had talked about in one of the earlier hearings, it is warranted or justified under existing conditions. It is not meeting the warrants is not something that is met as a result of the project. So if you don't build the project, the warrants for a traffic signal are met. This project itself is not causing the warrants to be met. So I think that's a significant distinction as we talk about in a minute. So this is an existing condition criteria where the signal will be met. The project is not causing the warrant to be met. As I mentioned as well, this is a device that operates 24/7. So as it relates to controlling the crosswalk, it's also controlling vehicle movements at the intersection. So as it relates to delays along Low Street, this is the most impactful in terms of increasing delays to through traffic, but residual vehicle queuing along the corridor. So as you think about what happens up at the Low Street Story Avenue intersection, just picture that move down to this location, because that's what we're talking about. Your peer review engineer, as well as myself, also talked about the fact that if there were a signal here, that it would need to be coordinated with a signal up at Story Avenue because of the dynamics that we talked about, the queuing between those intersections, and that they will interact with each other. So that has some significant ramifications. The other thing is we're thinking about the crossing and the impacts to traffic flow is the signal is going to turn red every single cycle on the street, whether there is a pedestrian there or not. So the delay is introduced every single cycle. Whereas we talk about these other devices, delay to Low Street motorists only occurs when a pedestrian pushes the button. So it's there when needed. It introduces delay when needed, but when there's not a need to introduce delay, it doesn't introduce delay. So it's the difference between this device and the other devices. Of course, again, cost isn't necessarily a consideration of the board, but this is the most, this is has a cost of about $1.2 million, would require widening of Low Street. One of the other criteria that we're asked to look at is how does this impact the street trees? This is probably the most impactful as it relates to impact to street trees, because we're going to widen both sides of the road to get all of the features that are needed for the traffic signal to be at this location. Next slide. So the next alternative is the pedestrian hybrid beacon. And the two scenarios that we looked at with regard to the beacon is, it basically is with or without a left turn lane and 5-foot shoulders is the great difference between these two. So the first option that we looked at is just basically installing the crossing and the hawk beacon in place without a left turn lane in the center. Under this alternative, you get the benefit of a positive control of the crossing in that there will be a red signal indication for when pedestrians need to cross the road. But when there's no pedestrian crossings, this type of device is dark. So traffic along Low Street flows as it does today. The only time Low Street traffic would stop is when there's a pedestrian crossing happening at the intersection. So the first scenario that we looked at is installing the hawk beacon basically with existing roadway geometry. So in that case, it addresses what the board had discussed at the last hearing is there's no change to the shoulder width, meaning that if you have 5-foot shoulders that are able to accommodate bicyclists out there today, they remain. Under this first scenario, there's no left turn lane installed at the center. The distinction as it relates to the left turn lane is similar to the distinction that we mentioned for the traffic signal in that we looked at the criteria for left turn lane. That criteria is met independent of the project. So it's an existing condition. It's not required to accommodate the additional traffic from the project. It's something that's needed today. Does it provide a benefit for traffic going in and out of the driveway with or without the project? It absolutely does, but it's not justified exclusively as a result of the project or the additional traffic that the project has created. So this scenario is addressing that. It's saying that this is a pre-existing condition and it's pre-existing independent of the project, and the need for that left turn lane is not driven by the project. However, the board had expressed concern about eliminating or reducing shoulder widths. This preserves that. There is no change to shoulder width. As it relates to street trees, similarly, there's no impact to street trees. There is one street tree on the corner of the Haji's 2 driveway that would need to be taken down in order to install a sidewalk, because as we talked about, if we're gonna have the crossing, we want the MIVA bus to be able to stop. In order to have the MIVA bus stop on that side, we have to provide a sidewalk. There's one tree on the corner of the driveway that need to be removed in order to create the wheelchair ramp down to the, in order to meet ADA requirements. On the project side, there's no impact to street trees. As it relates to low street traffic, as we said, this is only active when a pedestrian pushes the button. So the introduced delay is significantly less. It's half of what you'd have for the signalized option. And again, it's only when a pedestrian pushes the push button. The next scenario is the pedestrian hybrid beacon with a left turn lane and the shoulders being preserved. In order to do that, you need to widen Low Street. There's just not enough width in the existing paved area to have any type of feature added to the roadway. So an island, left turn lane, if you introduce any of those and you want to keep the 5-foot shoulders, you have to widen the roadway. So that's the second scenario. The difference in cost between these two alternatives, if you widen the roadway, the cost goes up by about over $500,000. The reason for that is it's full depth reconstruction of the pavement, but also we have to mill and overlay the entire section of roadway where the left turn lane would go, as well as the crossing. So it adds significant additional costs just because of it. Andy, can you go next? So we've shown the design, and I think one of the things that the board asked us to do is very clearly show what the so people that if nothing else, as you look at the slide, this is the first option where we do not provide the left turn lane. The blue lines that you see to the north and to the south, that's city-owned land. You can see there's a significant amount of public right-of-way that's available out there. So even to the extent that we're already widening, and we'll show that in the next slide, there's no private property acquisition that needs to take place. The other thing is you can clearly see where the street trees are. So under this scenario where there's no roadway widening, we add the crossing, we install the rectangular rapid flashing beacon. You can see the sidewalk being constructed on the south side that doesn't exist there today, so that we can have the MIVA bus. That tree is just, I would be on the right-hand side of the Haji's 2 driveway. You can see a little note there. You can see that tree is right where a wheelchair ramp would be installed or a sidewalk in that location, but no impacts on the north side of the roadway. So as we look at this alternative addresses what we were asked to look at in terms of the needs for a safe pedestrian crossing. It allows for the safe pedestrian crossing to take place. It preserves the 5-foot shoulders that exist along Low Street. So this accomplishes the goal of what the board asked us to be looking at. We want to connect this project to bus stops. And how do we do that and preserve the shoulders along Low Street? So this scenario accomplishes that goal. Next slide. So this slide shows that second pedestrian hybrid beacon option. What you see is the road is being widened both to the north and to the south in order to create the additional room in the paved cross section that's necessary to provide the left turn lane. So the widening in this case is required to provide the left turn lane and also to preserve the 5-foot shoulders along both sides of the roadway. So this, as I said, adds about over $500,000 of cost beyond the scenario that you'd seen before. And really the reason for that is where you see all of that yellow striping in there, that entire section of roadway has to be milled and overlaid. And then each side of the road where we're doing the widening is a full depth reconstruction because it's basically a shoulder area today. So we need to build up the base surface that's there and then pave over the top of it, new curbing, and then you have to pave the whole thing to lock in the new curbing. New sidewalks you see along either side of the road as well in order to accomplish this. Next slide. So the last option we looked at is what we had discussed previously, which is the rectangular rapid flashing beacon alternative. Under this scenario, as we had discussed prior, There's a left turn lane able to be provided, but as I mentioned, for any scenario where we provide something additional within the paved travel way, if we don't widen the road, it comes at a sacrifice, in this case, to the shoulders. And so that's what this scenario looks like. Again, similar to the pedestrian hybrid beacon, it's only active when a pedestrian pushes the push button. However, the amount of delay that's introduced with the rapid flashing beacon is less. The reason for the delay being less is because the way that the signal is, or the way the device is actually operated, if you have something that has a red indication displayed to you as a motorist, you need to have time to react to it. So you can't just have something that throws up a red signal because there's no way for you to anticipate it and react to the fact that the light's going to change. So when you have a rectangular rapid flashing beacon, you push the button, it starts the lights flashing, and when the pedestrian crosses, that's unlike the hawk beacon. When you push the button, it has to go through an initiation, just like a traffic signal where you have a yellow before you get to a solid red, and then you have to transition from the solid red before it goes dark. So as you do that transition to the device in terms of what the motorist sees, it has added delay, which doesn't come with the rectangular beacon. From the standpoint of how you're controlling the crossing, it's obviously less control compared to the hybrid beacon and then compared to the signal because you're not showing a red signal indication. What your consultant had asked as a result of the fact that we have less control to some extent of the crossing was that raised island. So again, a feature within the roadway itself that takes away from the shoulders if we don't widen the roadway. But that center island allowed for a two-stage crossing so that if you didn't make it all the way across the road, you had a refuge island in the middle. That island also produced the traffic calming effect in that you would have an object essentially in the center of the road that would slow traffic down as it's driving through the area where the crossing is. Next slide. So this is the last slide. This is the design that you've seen before. So you see the crossing just to the right or to the east of the driveway. The center island has been introduced with the beacon also in the center of the island. So we have the beacon on either side of the crossing, but we also have the beacon in the center. We have the left turn lane, but again, as we're introducing these features, they come at the expense of the shoulders, which is the thing that we had discussed. So as we've gone through this evaluation, and again, really looking at what is the problem that we're trying to solve here, but what we were asked to solve was how do we develop a safe pedestrian crossing? And looking at the control that would provide the most positive benefit for the safety of pedestrians crossing at this location. As we looked at each of these alternatives, so the signal, hybrid beacon, and then the rectangular rapid flashing beacon, the hybrid beacon was the device that we had said from the standpoint of looking at all of these criteria provided the most positive traffic control for this crossing. It is a device that could be installed without the need to widen the roadway. It would not impact street trees. On the north side, we have that one tree on the south side that would need to be removed under any of these scenarios in order for us to create a wheelchair ramp ADA requirement in this location. So that's what we've suggested is the option that has the pedestrian hybrid beacon without the road widening, preserving the 5-foot shoulders on either side of the roadway. We would have the MIVA bus stop on either side of the road, could be accomplished with the sidewalks as mentioned, and it would provide that positive traffic control. So it addresses the criteria that we were asked to look at in terms of that crossing and providing safety of pedestrians at that location. As it relates to that left turn lane, again, as it goes back to the project, it's not required as a result of the project. We are not suggesting that it's not beneficial to traffic flow along Moe Street, but it's a condition that is not created as a result of this project. We will have additional pedestrian crossings at this location. We do want to have access to the bus stop. And so that's why the recommendation as it relates to having that safe crossing, the hybrid beacon with the preservation of the shoulders results in solving that problem that we were asked to really look at for the safety of pedestrians. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have now, Mr. Chairman, or happy to review here from your consultant.
Okay, thank you. With that, I think we'll go to our traffic consultant for further input and guidance. And thank you again for being here.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the ZBA. I'm Kevin Dandry, the principal of TEC. the city, the ZBA's peer reviewer for traffic. In general, I think the application, the technical materials related to traffic and parking, has advanced significantly, even since the last hearing. In order to appease some of my prior concerns or comments, and I think Mr. Dirk did a good job at summarizing the pieces and parts of what we had understood was the board's request to get a deeper understanding of how the different types of devices and the elements of offsite mitigation, how they relate to one another and certain metrics for what may be more appropriate to consider. So the applicant's materials that they provided, the original matrix of those items and refinements that followed the workshop meeting that some of us had attended last Monday. I authored a letter dated October 27th. Matrix and provided state clarification. DDA in the city. There are certain elements of what Mr. Dark described. There are certain parts that are interchanged in different areas, but for the purpose of simplicity, those three provide a good snapshot. But there are different elements. One is the pedestrian crossing. Two is other safety-related traffic mitigation. I guess I'd rather start with first the other items. Left turn lane on Low Street for those. Something that I added to the matrix to the board where that left turn, seeking to turn left in the plaza, will increase with the 40B. It would increase more. Our building was reoccupied, there's no doubt about that. But as far as the application, in comparison to the existing conditions, the 40B project would increase the number of left turns. That is expected to increase the number of left by about 33%. That is not a minimus amount. It's something here in my prior peer review letters, testimony in front of the DBA. That left turn pocket is a more than under existing conditions, exacerbated by the 40B. And it's something that good practice would suggest. Oh. So with that in mind, that is an important element from my perspective. The introduction of a left turn lane did not, in my opinion, compromise the width of shoulders or other users of the road like bicycles. So if a left turn lane is warranted and necessary, you can feasibly and reasonably construct a 10-foot wide left turn pocket to pull those left turners out of the third lane and improve the mobility for Low Street traffic. That shouldn't be at the detriment of other roads. So I similarly recommend that improvements be made to retain roughly 5-foot shoulder that would allow for a similar bicycle accommodating feature at the end of the road that would compromise it. So left turn lane, I believe, is necessary. Widening shoulders, I believe, is appropriate to maintain a similar type of environment for bicycles. As far as the traffic control for the pedestrian movements, and there's been a lot of dialogue about this, there are several options. None are mandated and required, and it requires that degree of special guidance and expertise to weed through the where and why. And Mr. Dirk and I agree on a number of different things, as far as the complexity of things and the rationale for what may be warranted, both in real volumes, but also warranted. It's undeniable that that a project in the spot as a new resident increase that our recommendation was first that our recommendation is the applicant be responsible. In seven, I said the installation of traffic signal equipment and electrical service connection, box signal, pedestrian payment. Indicated posts and announcements. Design should also consider public. Actively accommodate future pole signal stations that are driving. That are being pursued. Essentially, it's pretty cheap money doing this work to add runs and pole boxes in the event that there's a change, you don't have to rip up again. Still the full signalization, if that's desired.
Guess my next question. No, neither you analyze. Signal. Both there. Level of increase in traffic. Warrant. Traffic. Like me, I'm not getting it.
So as we looked at the warrants, I think probably the trigger would be if something were to happen opposite. The significant amount of traffic, then I would suggest that the traffic signal probably without question would be justified. I think as we both looked at it as it relates to the existing condition. One of the existing condition, but when we look at it again, as engineers, look at what is the, you ask us as the public, what is the problem that you want solved? And then we go and look at how we go about solving it. As it relates to the signal, two things. Crossing, but that's not how we're going to install it. The signal as a result of all the time. So this move is quite that volume of traffic is not at a level like that. It's such an inconvenience that you want to delay the traffic on the street. So that's why we're saying if you add a fourth lane, they want the signal, and we really have now two lanes.
We just say, it would have to be a.
Yes, the hundreds.
Yes.
And just one of the things that is, and you would, it has maps on it, similar to what Kevin was saying. We would design it so you could take whatever's there, you put a signal in, you could take like the maps on the phones.
So when you say. Can you give me a sense of it? Is it bigger than a break block? More than 200. What would it mean?
So what we do is we have 80 to 100 vehicles per hour, for each hour, 8 hours. Warm. And so we need to have something that's a little substantial on this. So like if you take the comprehensive permit project and you built it across the street, that in and of itself isn't necessarily going to use that level. So bigger than yes.
Sorry. Satisfied. In this case, it is warranted under the traffic on the drive.
Read that in your matrix. That. Then, under listing project, language change may be met. So I'm a little confused here. If the warrant obligations are met currently, how are they maybe met? You're adding traffic.
Always the first one because what we did produce them. The warrants are different for the pedestrian highway. And so as we're looking at traffic signals, the warrants that we have to do with traffic, is the volume. When you look at the highway, you can the pedestrian. So the unit traffic, volume of traffic, and the number of pedestrians crossing. There are pedestrians crossing, but not at a level that would meet the warrant. So you need to have 20 pedestrians per hour crossing. The project plus existing would likely use that, but it's an estimate versus reality of county such as the warrants are different. Helpful.
I mentioned earlier in my testimony this evening, garage is configured, there's a limited number of spaces out on the side that are associated with the project. In my opinion, will have a very small increase, negligible increase in new sites. In the context of the, in contrast to the left turn part, Pennsylvania Hall. The 40B project is not expected to exacerbate side street volumes. It doesn't increase the warranty. Most of the traffic will not be warranted in that direction, warranted either up to Story Avenue. Yes, maybe under existing conditions, but we don't expect that it has to be exercised in the way.
In your most recent presentation, 4 bullets. You know where I'm referring to. Just trying to understand. Say that. Then say left turn traffic. 2 vehicles, so I'm just not a traffic engineer, but these are 22 are going in, but none of them are coming out. Help me to understand that.
You're, we have a right turn and we have them coming out the center. Or they come out east. They end up being a through. So you're looking at the volume of left traffic. Referring to his left turns entering the center driveway. And the purpose of that was looking at the percent increase that add burden to the left turn movement in the center as the board and your consultant were considering need for a left turn lane and how does the project increase the left turn lane on Main Street. So that's what the purpose is. So it's really left turn entering the center.
All the traffic to and from the east, coming from on heading in that direction, in the site, the garage. Trips would come in and out east of the driveway, not out of the site. Those would have no.
And you're comfortable. Guys, we'll work it out the same.
Next three guys from the tree. You know, We're very accurate in facts. When I talked to Jared last week, um, the option that I'm suggesting that the board endorse, home signal with a left turn lane. 750,000, you wrote down 720. So they are extremely close with what you could expect for a facility like this at the concept level, but very reasonable.
Any, major way of maintaining all. Who would be responsible?
If it's the low street right away, it would be like city permits of traffic control device within a city right away. So I would suggest that once it's designed and constructed and inspected and approved, that it would. And then that's similar to most.
What happened for the traffic?
And really just back to that other concept, because I think it affected. In this case, some of my own field observations for a couple of the last hearings that was EDA.
Which one?
The one that does not left there. So right now, if you are coming down from Story House and down the hill on Low Street, and left in the center driveway. Depending on the section. Going slowly and running the vertical column. But what I've heard is that. You know. With introduction of the new trip out there. We can increase the likelihood that cars would get stacked up. I mean, not only the existing left turns go to the closet, but the new ones. Have a problem. There would be delays at Low Street eastbound. Under the, if there's not a left turn parking. And this curbing. Well, another thing, don't make friendly and comfortable. Driving responsibly. There's a left turn. All and you got it. Feel comfortable doing so. I would agree with you. I've seen it. But in this case, where it's curved. Uh, you can't, you don't have a reason to move it. And that's, you know, the new concept. It's important because our ability. So that Problem.
Well, I don't want to be completely right with, but I think, keep in mind, what we're talking about is a matter of convenience versus safety, and I think what's, to some extent, we're all concerned about safety. We want a safest situation that can exist out there. But as we look at the facts as they relate to the analysis and looking at vehicle crashes in this area, is that there is not a safety issue. Facts don't speak to the vehicle crashes happening on this road as a result of congestion. It's not there. It's all been reviewed, and I would, in fact, as we talk about this, there are no more. There are safety ones. They're not met. So when we're talking specifically as it relates to the left turn pocket, talking about a matter of convenience, not about safety. Crashes that are happening at this intersection are not angled crashes resulting from the left turn lane. So it is something where, is a left turn lane beneficial? Absolutely. You're not going to get either one of us. Kevin's, been pretty clear he wants the left turn lane. I'm not saying it's not beneficial. What I am saying is we have a comprehensive plan at this location. The problem that we're trying to solve is how do we safely get additional pedestrians across the road at this location to have access to the bus stop. Not beacon, preserving the shoulders without widening the roadway solves that problem. If what we're saying is that the problem is a matter of convenience for the public along Low Street, then you add the left turn lane. That's not the problem that we're trying to solve. The problem has to solve is the safety. And again, back to there is not, based on the crash history, there is not a safety issue relating to the convenience of motor vehicle traffic. People are delayed, but it's not causing crashes. It's not causing angle crashes that would say to us as we looked at it, you need a left turn lane or you need a traffic signal. The crash patterns don't speak to that. If you want convenience, because we have a 33% increase in left turn traffic, and you want the traffic to go free flow along Low Street, not have to stop because someone's turning left in the plaza, you have the left turn lane. That's solving that problem. Again, looking at the project, we have a 30% increase, but the additional left turn lane is a matter of convenience. It's not addressing safety or the accommodation for the pedestrian. It's not a safety issue. The introduction of the hop, even without the left turn lane, could introduce crashes by having positive traffic control because you're stopping traffic that's not stopping. So the same could be said with that type of traffic control. It goes back to what are we trying to say? The left turn lane isn't necessarily, there's not a pre-existing crash history that says that because of the crashes that are happening, because adding more traffic to the left turn lane is going to increase the crashes. When you look at the crash pattern, the predominant crash pattern is actually rear end crashes westbound headed to Story Avenue. Has nothing to do with left turning traffic. There's not. That one rear end crash heading eastbound. Well, yeah. Or just rear end crashes eastbound because of what described. Someone's trying to make a left-hand turn or side crash. Someone's trying to make a left-hand turn and you try to squeeze by and get, the passenger side. Or someone's making a left-hand turn and someone realizes. Those type of crashes are not happening in Tuesday. There's 7 crashes over 5 years. Majority of them are just heading. So again, it really goes back to what is the problem we're trying to solve. We want to solve both. If what you're saying is we think both of those issues are problems, then exactly what Mr. Gannon is. But those added left turn vehicles, what we're showing in terms of the analysis is, yeah, there's delay, but they're able to get into the plaza. There are gaps so that they're able to do. We don't show that the increase in that left turning traffic is backing. So look at it, it says is again, left turn accommodation absolutely is a good idea. Go back and look. Talking about, really talking about. So if we're talking about safety, if you said, because we were clear about this when we did our left turn lane once analysis, it's warranted based on the volume. It's not warranted based on. That's good. I envision coming to a story. Queuing up for the turn pocket, the left turn pocket. And we already know because folks may try to circumnavigate around that. What I'm envisioning is a westbound backup during PM traffic, or the shift change in energy, or any number of now all of a sudden we have a frustration. I understand how in practice, people, lights, dogs, folks, all using the intermodality of misbehaving. So, incredible. Protecting turn pocket. But how do we program modeling in practice versus how we and you know disperse in that language? But it's a type of presentation that we can understand. Just imagine the future. Once this is done, it's done. Yeah, look ourselves in the eye, make sure that we have to be look at every possible beyond you know the talking about new individuals. You know, the lens of what we already know. He's better understand here, your as well. I know that absolutely. Appreciate the fact that going to like the last time. So if we can kind of not to oversimplify, let's break it into two pieces. And that's so as it relates to this option, well, other modes of transportation are not impacted in any way in this solution. Pedestrians have sidewalks, pedestrians have the hybrid. Bicyclists have the shoulders, doesn't change. So the only difference that we're talking about is boils down to left turn lane. That's the only difference we're talking about. So for the multimodal accommodation, pedestrians, bicycles, walkers, they're all accommodated here. There's no change for them. In fact, there's a benefit because of the process. The difference being there's additional automobiles and there's additional left turn. So that's what it really boils down to is you're looking at the future because the future for pedestrians and bicycles is not changing. In fact, it's improved. Difference is the left turners trying to get into the plaza and the dynamic that relates to the travel rules. Backups. How does this all work? So we do look at the past to see how people are using this intersection. And then we look at how the impacts of the additional traffic demand impact on those future conditions. To make a leap to say that all of a sudden we're going to have a lot more bad drivers. And so because there's going to be a lot more, going to be an increase in crashes, I don't think we can make the leap to say that that's going to be the case. We expect that the drivers are going to be similar. So if you took the position that the volume is going to go, so if you have a number of crashes happening per volume of traffic on the roadway, if the volume goes up, then there are going to be additional crashes. I think that's what we expect. Either one of us would say, if we look at the past and there's a number of crashes happening, okay, if we add more volume, I think where it comes at is that increase in crashes, any increase in crashes, I would say is acceptable, but as it relates to the relationship between the volume of crashes that are, the relationship of the volume of traffic and the crashes out there, is it all of a sudden going to become disproportionate effect on the roadway? And is it directly created as a result of this? Because at the end of the day, what we're looking at is at this location. We're not mitigating impacts for everything else in the area. Accommodate, as you said, in the future, try the best we can to accommodate it, but also what is the project creating in terms of the issue? And what we're saying is, yes, we're going to have an increase in left turn volume. We expect we're going to have pedestrian costs that will increase because they're the vulnerable users. But really, that left turn lane, if the type of crashes that are happening there continue, and they grow because of the volume of traffic, those type of crashes are not related to the left turn. It will create some backups, but it goes back to this now, not related to necessarily safety, even if the type of crashes are. This analysis here is a non-wide roadway with no left turn. Very clear, the volume doesn't change. Here's the scenario. The, the volume of traffic using this roadway, with or without the left turn lane, doesn't change. The volume of traffic, as you say, relating to vulnerable users, increase, it doesn't change. It's the same volume of traffic with this scenario versus the other scenario. The only difference between the two scenarios, because you keep 5-foot shoulders, you keep sidewalks. The only difference is the left turn lane. That is the only difference. Arguably, as you look at this, and again, I completely understand kind of the way the test. An argument could be made as well in this that you are introducing in you widen the road. Because this is not a 36-foot wide road. It's a 42-foot road. So you widen the road. What you have done in this scenario is you've allowed the ability for increased speed of traffic. Because now if I'm traveling from Story Avenue eastbound, the scenario that you described where I have to wait for a left-turning vehicle to some extent, it does slow the traffic down because you have to wait for the left-turning vehicle or you really slowly go by. This situation. This scenario is not a pedestrian crossing. There's not, even if someone's making a left, like I can drive the speed that I'm comfortable driving in this roadway. Back to the interaction with all the road users, it is no different. It's the same volume of traffic.
One back. Yeah, yeah. That's turn pocket. Analyze. The number of left turns in relation to the number. There as a safety measure. Introduction of the left turn lane. Worse than other. It's exacerbated with. It's not there to make a matter of convenience. Maybe a tertiary benefit of the safety improvement, and that's primarily why I also have been highly experienced in 40B projects as a reviewer, and the focus is on safety. It's not on convenience, it's not on capacity, it's about how to safely accommodate the different users. The increases that may come from the projects. The only reason for putting a left in my work, this application is because of the increased likelihood left turn is going in at that point. And if there was option for somebody to bypass, increased likelihood shoulder that might not.
Trying to right fit in there with lighting so that it might not impact the total and hopefully doesn't impact trees on others.
Good evening about 9 o'clock.
They're the two suburbs are very much interconnected. I figured it and left turn. The reason for considering a left turn pocket would be increase the likelihood of access to the likelihood of crashes, rear end crashes going east and like pulling the left turners out of the street. That's really the left turn. If you consider that, you're trying to preserve a lane shoulder, the 5-foot shoulder. That's from a geometric standpoint. Traffic control as it relates on the east side. Is an opportunity to consider that higher level of control. The other thing that I suggested within the letter, as a tweet, what's up on the screen now, and I mentioned it earlier, just the strike area of the road, and with the RRFP scenario, that's a great opportunity to have raised traffic over there for not only refuge, if somebody takes a longer time to cross. But by default, it's also going to add an element of traffic calming because you visibly with the roadway so that in the area of the pedestrian, it's not going to be the full point refuge area. So I pointed that out. Number 8. Consider the construction of a curved center median road in Low Street in the vicinity of the with supplemental push buttons for pedestrian. This will slightly extend by widening improvements along Low Street just east of the center driveway beyond and only insignificantly. But again, if you do a left turn lane on the left side, there's the opportunity that would be complemented not only to pedestrians, All traffic is. Those areas. It's on red and the walk interval is up, yes. I agree with that.
I think the distinction, there is no dispute between the two. Benefits of having long-term. I think very clearly, if you look at the criteria, if you don't meet the criteria, it's advisable to provide a left turn lane where you have left turn traffic for the reasons you described. It improves traffic on communities. But it also provides some benefit in terms of using even if it's basically, if you have the room to do it, you should do it. That's what a project, the impact of that is the solve here. I think we're coming at it clear. There is no scenario where you ask me, do you not think that a left turn lane? I would say yes, it is absolutely beneficial. Is the left turn project? I would say it is not needed for the construction of this project. Is a fine line. You say, well, I don't see a distinction here. You're telling us as a professional that the two of you both agree with the left turn lane here. You know, that's going to weigh in terms of my decision. I'm not going to tell you that a left turn lane is desirable. All I'm saying is that as it relates to the impacts of this project in and of itself is not creating that. I think what I would have to look at is what are you doing as it relates also downstream to the low street. That I would say that, but I'm also there's a dynamic of driving too fast on this as it relates to the multimodal accommodations that we're talking about. So creating a left turn lane as it relates to this driving, it is a benefit if you're someone who's trying to go into this plaza, or if you're on Low Street and you do not want to be delayed by increasing traffic. Or if that's the problem that you're trying to solve, by the left turn lane to do. Is it going to be safer or by providing the left turn lane there? I think back to the discussion of the chair, and I think it's really subjective in terms of the problem you're solving. What I was saying is that there is not a problem as it relates to crashes that are caused by the fact that there's not a left turn lane. There's just the evidence as it speaks to the crashes. There is not a crash history at this intersection that says that because of what's going on, you need to have a left turn lane. We're going to have increased left turners, but there's not a problem. So the presumption and the leap that we're really taking is saying, because we're increasing left turn volume, therefore there's going to be an increase in crashes related to left turn. But that's not, it's not there today. It's just not there. Absolutely. But there is in no scenario where I would sit up here and say, do you think left turn? If you said, let's just have a conversation. Do you think left turn lane is a good idea at this location? I would tell you yes. There's no dispute. The dispute, or really the discussion. The discussion is, how do we tie that? I know this is what you're struggling with, to this project at this location, based on the increase in traffic in the district. And that's the decision you have. I think we presented the facts. I have no dispute or disagreement with this as it relates to the left turn lane. The question is, based on the information that we presented, is it needed at this location based on the increase in traffic in the history you're looking at? Is there a crash problem that would be solved by that?
Yeah, I think, first for the benefit of the public, in looking at the roads, listening. I just wanted to clarify to the expert, everyone, that these are kind of magic words, convenience and safety. So, for example, what we're doing on this comprehensive permit is comprehensive. It's cutting Freudian knot, saying you don't need to go through special permit process with planning. You don't need to go through site plan. Just come here. We're going to make a decision that your project is consistent with our local. And in doing that, we have to take into account concerns. What are the local concerns? Well, under the guideline, regulations, under the state regulations, one of them is need to protect the safety of the occupants, safety. And then convenience isn't highlighted, I don't believe, in the regulations. And these go up on appeal, and they always to the housing. They have recorded decisions, and again, what they look at is a key issue or is it a convenience? That's why the consultants keep saying that. I want to keep asking. So, safety issues are important. None of us up here want to ourselves 400 people that are. So we have, and it was very helpful, we have these options. We make pedestrians and make them perfectly safe. Make them. My only questions, and I think we've heard the back and forth, the experts, I just want to clarify with Kevin, that I think the difference that Ken was trying to suss out is we're saying net increase in hand turns is a safety, whereas the consultant, the applicant is not ready to say it's safe. How that work? Okay, done with that. Next question. Is there no safety benefit? Well, that has to do with vehicle crashes. Vehicle safety. Is the left-hand turn lane that you're recommended, does that have any influence or professional opinion on the safety of pedestrians crossing those?
It's controlled.
Got it. Next question. Neither of you have told me about pedestrians going east and west. All been talking about. I'm asking because it came out at our last hearing, really not possible. Walk to Story Avenue, the shopping center. The applicant has done a laudable job, right? Adding these significant shops. So we ran into a brick wall when we talked about it. Was you can't. Have to walk all the way over to the market basket. Thank you. Practical matter. What I was trying to get at last time is how many of the pedestrians are going to be using those streets? Sounds like a lot, most of them, because there's nowhere else to get out to the outside world. If they're walking, correct?
Depends on their ability, but yes, I would agree that with a couple things. I think it's challenging to suggest the applicant being on site to go further with the pedestrian connections there because of breathing challenges. That's one. Two is bus movement on Low Street. One of the other things I suggested in our letter is that the application of new crosswalk markings and lane markings on all approaches. So that new crosswalk mark, stop lines and signs cross not only the Port Plaza driveway, but the Hodges 2 driveway as well, so that east-west movements. I understand that existing use, potential for future use on the Port, and Mosby, and the middle and low is forward. But that's why specifically I recommended that, not just the crosswalk, hybrid beacon, but other crosswalks.
You're not recommending a signal,
Not,
neither a rapid flashing in nor a hot.
no, there's not the same level
It's not a
of,
volume.
it's not so much a volume, but the crossing distances are not as long, number of actually interact and sessions in that cross, with, in comparison to.
All right. All right, then my last two questions, I'm done with this. The end of your letter, you say, Kevin, that the other tech comments are. Or two. Said. Wasn't my consent, but. So, explaining that came from the side. It's a good idea. Parallel parking is a bad idea. None of us at the last meeting objected to adding parking. I just wanted. Last is, I had a question which still wasn't answered. Not make or break. Curious, and still show that there's no. And is there any new?
Sorry, we're gonna address that civil garage now. On the eastward side of the building.
And this one by.
Yep, exactly.
All right, that's all I have. Where pretty neat was there. Continue. Yeah. Which is. There's no, there's no, um,
Others to participate that way, we understand the limitations.
Yeah, to be more explicit, so. Fact is, when you write in testimony. On the website. Rather than when you speak, I videotape it, it's in the next. Errors actually.
Yes.
Or the meeting?
Yes, these are 40. Is also covered. And second. I appreciate everyone's involvement. I appreciate. Good luck. Thank you. I'm gonna pick up.
And trying to say planning on. It's like, kind of driveway. So previously when we met, we found incorporated that this plan as part of the, the blue kind of highlight that blue dash line that has pedestrian connection. All on set of plans, we've added some more detail. The plan shows a, just over kind of moving through that drop off area in front of the building.
smaller delivery trucks. There's a separate delivery in the back. This is just a plan. Kind of meeting, kind of mentioned, there's parking. And will be managed. And there were some questions regarding, existing impervious areas. Proposed impervious. Created a couple of exhibits. This one here shows the existing site. Our building, kind of that round shaded color. 1,000 square feet. Property line is highlighted. Limits that line. You know, property development. Little landscape. Proposed exhibit kind of showing the same thing. So this proposed building is around 20,000 square feet bigger. So it's around 71 feet. Adding some landscaping. This is our updated landscape plan. Again, we continue to maintain those, um, um, and that's generally it in terms of that we discussed. I know that PCG Engineering, they did provide their latest comment. They did recommend some conditions. And though, quite an extensive report. Only topic. Not only is it state. It kind of shows where that outfall is, and it shows, again, this is that watershed boundary that drains. You can see it's not just, you know, the water. Well, it's a lot of, you know, the project continues to operate volumes. That, we are being from a high level, from a practical standpoint, we did look at, all of them, thinking, bills, looking at maybe the city doing a much larger study. So, alcoholics. Wait, well, I want- So, first of all,
Where is that here?
that's actually part of the new sidewalk connections. It's actually a new platform. Yes.
I just. I wonder.
No, and that might be a little bit confusing on the plan. It's really just meant to show kind of the limit of work. Yep.
Which slide is it?
Well, the purple area is the fourth pond site, and then the red areas was really. That need. And that also. A lot of interconnected water.
Like to address the pedestrian access to Story Avenue here, yeah.
Yeah. What we've done is we have pushing crosswalks throughout. And if someone wants to go from the project to Story Avenue, be no different than if they want to go from Market Basket to Story Avenue. And, like Randy said, ADA requirements. Openings permit sidewalks. Also, they can travel up through Shaw's, go across protected, across the connector road, the marketplace shops. I think lying on the side, walk up the Story Avenue that way. That's how. I can't find any public space, public amenities or anything, there are benches, there are parking, there, like said, anything for the public.
So there's some, I know there's some amenities as part of the project. So
I understand this one. Really understand. I'm talking about. Is there any room? That's what. I think it makes this a little livable for the area who live there. Going to the area. There's space for that. They, picking up 50 by 50 park.
Mr. Bennett, when Ed, Mr. Bradford goes through the architectural plans, he'll talk about the amenities and access to them. As opposed to the simple person. I'm just asking you to have.
Hello. I mean, like maybe percent of. From
80%.
oh, put it up. Help me then. Don't show that. What percentage would it be?
I don't know the actual percentage, so the blue shaded area is the port. Itself is, you know,
Oh, okay. Okay. Oh, okay. And I take it also is aside from those two areas. And other you into that outfall?
That's correct.
Yeah, so I'm just trying to get a sense of what percent of overall flow is outflow comes from this. I mean, you know, order of magnitude based upon that and what we know is based upon that. Yeah. I'm just trying to sense of the contribution. Okay, that's all I have.
Yeah, just on the 9 pages of civil plans. So first the staff, yeah, you could please ask Phil Christensen, our expert, to. Thanks. I had the same question. First of all, does he agree that this diagram is correct? What is the percentage? Site to this? Also, there's a tree or a plant schedule. You know, I don't think we have anyone on the board usually qualified. Have someone, tree commission, tree board. Right, and then one question, I give up on the overnight parking. I guess the reason why I'm going to drop it is that there's no parking allowed on Low Street. So, say if someone is a resident and they're illegally staying overnight in one of those spots, that's going to be a burden. It's going to be this week. Kaplan did raise a question that I wanted to ask the team about, which is he was saying pedestrians is a practical matter. There is a satellite picture next to the savings bank and Newburyport Bank. They call themselves now. So is there that's property is owned by somebody else. So you already have a
The connection between the two plazas?
Yes, I'm being absolutely practical. I mean, we were saying there's no, from Port Plaza, there's no direct handicap accessible way to get.
Correct.
Got it. But Mr. Kaplan was saying as a practical matter, people can cut through.
They have a legal, so there's a cross easement in the connection, right?
Yeah.
So both facilities have a right to pass and repass over that connection into the other facility.
Probably. I know we had a little bit of a tilt about this when you thought I was asking about site control. You are going to want to see. I haven't seen the result.
A few, like, second meeting after the request was made, I had a whole package.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't know.
It's in there, but all of the other easements are in that package.
Never seen there's. Doesn't matter. The point is, to the point of approving a project, you know, there's an interdependence with off-site properties. Totally normal. If you were just a planning board doing site plan, I want to see the sure says. And the same thing. So there's another sort of where the Jersey Mike's is. Got it. That's yet another. Okay. And then the only question I had for Buller is you have a table on parking. Talk about at our first meeting. Give the ability. Let's say, for example, shopping center was. And this project necessitates it dropping down to 90. We have the power. So I want to make sure I understand the numbers. So on your table,
Look at the zoning.
Yeah,
zoning
looking at
table.
the zoning table for a lot of people. The parking for the shopping center is now. I'm sure, because it looks like it's going up.
It is actually, yes.
Okay.
So it is actually adding, there's also adding parking spaces on the north side of the building.
Yeah.
We're actually.
And help me out, so, but permitted, like, so far as we know, I mean, there isn't any approval that we're amending the shopping center that says, you know, that. What our current says, right? Currently, if you do the math, shopping center requires 550. You're already way over, and tomorrow, even more way over.
Right.
The
I just wanted to close out if I could to reiterate that Mr. Christensen's letter and full report talks about how we have met the state stormwater by reducing volume, improving quality, reducing velocity to the greatest extent. That's kind of the wrap up of this. Okay.
in light of the time whatever getting these. Oh, no, no, no. Please.
Hello, Ed Bradford, with the annual. In charge of the design side. For the project. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Preliminary thought. A peer review, as Attorney Mead noted, this is a preliminary response. The comment in just in about a week ago. We are heavy into the design. There is a lot of coordination with the bullet team on landscape and civil, and we look forward to coming back with a more complete design response at a future hearing. We also very much appreciate the thoughtful comments that we've read in the peer review. They've definitely sharpened our focus, and no doubt will improve the design. So our presentation, I will keep it brief, I know that the hour is getting late here, is focused on that peer review, and we structured the presentation around the key areas that are identified in the peer review. And as this exhibit shows, there are 4. So, area 1 that's highlighted is the suggested improvements to the entry plaza and drop-off area that is outlined in the peer review recommendations. Area 2 is the important frontage along Low Street that I can cover in a moment. Area 3 focuses on the actual building materials on the building and material hierarchy and use of brick masonry. And then area 4 covers a stormwater strategy that's associated with the landscape design. In the next 3 slides, I'm going to walk you through again our preliminary response. Excuse me. To the first 3 comments. I think at a future hearing, the Bowler team will be covering the comment 4 related to the landscape and stormwater comments. Next slide, please. So this first comment from the peer review is focused on the courtyard and drop-off area. The peer review recommends special paving pattern and removal of the center island. We do completely agree with the importance of enhancing this entry courtyard as a place of arrival. It is the front door to the building. So happy to address that. And as suggested, we agree with the idea of replacing the asphalt within that asphalt paving in that entry courtyard area with unit pavers likely, again, to signal the special importance of this place of arrival and to slow vehicles. So that, of course, in Newburyport, there are plenty of great precedents we can look to for brick pavers and plazas. Just on the upper right hand show Market Square is one you could look to, but there are endless examples in downtown Newburyport. In particular, in the lower right hand corner precedent that the peer review report outlined is a more contemporary one that shows a pretty good example, we think, of using different colors and textures, lighting, planters, and the like, as a way to create a plaza that can be shared with vehicles and pedestrians with a focus on a high quality pedestrian environment that's safe. Other examples we'll look towards as we work with the Bowler team to refine the plaza drop-off area. As far as the island goes, this is something we're continuing to study. The team currently feels that for clarity and safety, the island is important. I should note that it has been modified and lengthened with the addition of the head and parking spaces. So I think it is actually now larger than when the peer review was done. The design has changed, so it's a little bit different layout. But we will be looking at modifications of that island, lower plantings. We agree with the peer review that the tree or trees are really not viable, and using entry court with traffic and the like. We'll be looking at modifications that we'll bring to you at future hearing. Next slide, please. The second area of focus in the peer review is, again, the important Low Street edge. The focus of the peer review is on the screening of the garage wall. And again, we completely agree with the comments and the design recommendations. But I wanted to first highlight what our approach is to screening this wall, and I outlined this on our earlier hearing. And that is shown in the upper 2 exhibits. There's a plan and and just below that, a rendering. And our approach to screening the garage really is twofold. And the first is that we have set this garage, we've used the slope of the site to our advantage, we think, that the majority of the garage is buried. But this low street edge, because of the slope of the site, is the portion of the garage that would otherwise be exposed if we didn't employ various strategies to screen it. What we have done with this design, we think importantly, is to introduce the 7 apartment homes along that frontage. So we pulled the garage back, we lined that garage with homes so that there are private entries and stoops that are going to create a much improved pedestrian environment. First and foremost, that's a basic to our design. What the peer review focuses on though is the areas, the 2 shallow courtyards that are between those apartment homes. And of course, those are important edges too. So we again agree with the recommendations in the peer review, and that's what we're working on right now. And we'll bring revised designs to you at an upcoming hearing. We'll be looking to introduce some green screening. And in the lower right-hand corner, we show a couple examples of how that can be done with structures that hold vines off of the masonry so that we don't damage the masonry, but green up those courtyards. And then finally, the other recommendation in the peer review that we agree with and has already been discussed this evening a few times is the preservation of those mature trees along Low Street. So as Randy highlighted and as documented in the resubmission of the civil and landscape drawings, that is definitely our intent. And finally, the point 3 in the peer review, again, relates to the material hierarchy and the proposed application of brick in our proposed design. And the suggestion that more brick should be used on primary elevations with a particular focus on the peer review on the wall that terminates the edge of the entry courtyard, and then opposite that, the wall that would is a sort of important element at the north edge of the pool courtyard. These are points that we agree with. You can see in the rendering on the left-hand column, that is our current design. Our wall in the entry court is in the proposed design clad in a cement board material. We agree with the comment, and we're working to incorporate along that rear facade. We think it'll be a big improvement. And again, on the right-hand side, we don't have to look very far for great precedents. That's just a handful. But again, our inspiration here, of course, is the wonderful buildings downtown that have the brick punched residential openings above, in many cases, an open storefront and a lighter base. That these are precedents, of course, that we've looked on and are going to continue to look at as we incorporate the peer review comments. That's it for me. Again, we much appreciate the comments, and we're really looking forward to taking the next steps and incorporate them.
Very good. Yeah. Preference for the peer review before public comment.
You. I'm David Campbell. I'm an architect and urban planner with Campbell Associates. We're based in Cambridge, and I can be brief because my colleague, Mr. Bradford hit the points that we brought up in our peer review. You have a difficult challenge, actually, because the way the development happens in fits and starts, where individual property owners do projects on a parcel by parcel basis, belies the fact that over the course of a generation, an area like this can change dramatically. And I think you should anticipate that, because this project is actually signaling the transformation of a fairly standardized suburban strip mall that has lots of good economies, but is changing because that's not how people get their goods anymore. It needs to be a place. So I just have 5 recommendations. I'm just going to summarize these on the slides. And much of what you've been talking about tonight is actually transcending this property. And that's part of the problem, because when you just look at the single property, well, you lack the ambition to connect it to the neighborhood, to the systems, to the commercial areas, right? So it's a very difficult balance, and you've done a great job. But part of the problem is you can't look at sites in isolation, nor can you ask a property owner to solve problems that go beyond the property. So the 5 recommendations are actually, I would call nip and tucks around the building, but in aggregate actually will make a big difference. Next slide, please. So as my colleague mentioned, there's these 4 areas that are actually going to make a big difference. I'm not messing with the massing. We're not lopping off portions of the building. It's actually exquisitely efficient, as a double-loaded corridor building is, and nearly all of the parking is below grade. I mean, that should be applauded, because it's hard to do on most sites. So the big stuff, the massing, the setbacks, the step backs, are actually working pretty well. The south-facing courtyards, carving out the massing, putting in wings, that's actually pretty good stuff. So the first one, that courtyard drop-off, I'll just go through it briefly. Next slide, please. It looks a little lonely, and that's not just the rendering, because you've got a little sapling there facing north. The plaza actually is going to have some definition. It needs to be, as Mr. Swanson said, it needs to be a place. It could actually be a place that's shared. And when you carve out space for cars and differentiate it from pedestrians, it actually undermines the movement of both. This should be a plaza, and I would suggest a more European-style plaza, not one with asphalt and then curbs. It should actually be safer, in fact. If cars don't know, they have to slow down if they don't see curbs. This should be one of those spaces. It's not much larger than this room, actually. Next, please. And yeah, we showed a very contemporary example in Monterey, California, because I was just there. This is a convention center, but it should be well lit. It could be active. It could be well programmed. And I think that's some of what you're getting to. Where's the public space? The Green Street edge, we've talked a lot about these trees. Hopefully they can remain, but the parking garage, and I do think that this green screen will make a difference, next slide, on how the building interfaces with Low Street, not Joy Street. I'm sorry, I misspelled that in my memo. Low Street, the Joy Street's maybe better. And so it's just in these 2 gaps. Next slide, please. There's lots of creative ways to do that. I think it will be seen from the streets. It's a fairly high vertical surface. Next slide is facing south. It'll grow like crazy, and if you can keep those trees, this will make a difference. It'll actually be a very pleasant experience along the street. Next, please. This actually matters a lot, and I'm glad that the developer and his team are considering it, because if you think of this courtyard space as the primary, not entrance, because the entrance is to the side, but the primary elevation, the way in which this rendering, you see that gray material that sort of gingerly rests on what is a brick veneer, that facade should actually be the dominant facade. Hierarchically, in proportions to the building, I would take the material that's on the base around it and run it up. So maybe it's the cream color, it's not the red, but that should really be something impressionable. And that lower level, which is the amenity space, could actually open up onto that courtyard. I think they should pursue ways to make it a little bit more porous, because that's the main amenity space that leads to the pool. And so here you see it in particular where that elevation really wants to be stronger. And if it has a nicer material, I think that will help. Yes. That could then also extend to the other side, and I agree, Newburyport has hundreds of examples of where this is continuous through your downtown. But it doesn't need to be everywhere. And then this is actually one of those issues that we're probably a year too late. But it's too bad that all of the water that's being addressed and the stormwater management that's been met in terms of the law, you don't see it. And boy, this is a site that has a great change. And as one thinks about the evolution of this mostly impervious surface, next please, one should definitely find ways to celebrate, to channel that water, to make it more visible, to reduce the load on the infrastructure that's below grade. Next slide, and there's lots and lots of good examples where that can happen. And just as a way to summarize, and this is, again, isn't so much about the applicant, but the future phases need to be great streets. Streets are a city's greatest public spaces, and you should think about that drive aisle, not just as, does it need a sidewalk or not? It should be a great street that goes through the site over time. Next, this is a project we did in Buffalo, New York, 20 years. This is a tiny little town in Kansas of 700 people. Look at the streets they're making. Literally, it's 700 people in a tiny little town in Kansas. Rain gardens, trees, shade, dealing with the landscape and dealing with water. Next, please. Look at that. That can be done here, and it should be. And again, this suggests the next development site. Next. And so therefore, I encourage the ZBA and the planning board and the city to now think about the evolution of this district. I'm going to call it a district well beyond the 212 units, because this area will change, especially if there's some rezoning. And then the connections, the framework, I'm going to call them, of how they connect to one another is really what's essential. But otherwise, I feel like they are a building community and they're laying groundwork for future development. And they're introducing some compelling spaces that were none previously existed. You think the architecture could be elevated a little bit in a few spots.
I'm going to.
Lisa Medina Smith, 175 Story Avenue. I'm going to first thank the consultant and developer for putting together that matrix. It's very helpful for me to address all the information. But I want to address some of the consultant's questions about how to tie the left turn lane to this project. One thing that I've seen in the data that's been presented is it's been vehicle only. Vehicle trip dispersal, but we're going to have pedestrians and bikers. So there's going to be a mix of agents working in this corridor. I think it would behoove us to use the simulation that they're doing to introduce those actors and see what that could look like in terms of mix. We haven't seen any firm projections of what we expect the pedestrian trip dispersal to look like, whereas going on Low Street and how that mix impacts the mobility and the vehicle traffic. And I've also heard a lot of mention around crash history. I'd like some explanation if when we say crash, do we mean vehicle to vehicle or vehicle to vehicle and vehicle to pedestrian? Because we have a history of some pedestrian collisions in the past. One person mentioned the fatality. I think that's a big consideration here. We were talking about the left lane. Another example on this corridor is around Colby Lane, where when there's a will, there's a way, there are already bad actors. We have those bollards on the side where it's to prevent going in the right. If you look at the bollards, there's already an example of those kind of being run into. So we already know that people are doing that. If we have bikers and pedestrians in that east-west kind of traffic pattern, there is a very non-zero chance that they can get hit if we have any bad actors. And we have examples of this. It's not an anecdote. We already have this in another part of the sport. So I think there's a really big change in terms of safety conditions for you to consider, given the different actors that we'll have on this board. The other thing I wanted to ask about is we have dropped mention of the fair share for future monetary contribution towards complete streets. I'm wondering if that has evolved, if we're still at that 75K number, what's the right number around that, and then what is the fair share? And then I'm going to switch over to the U-shaped driveway. One thing I'm having trouble is thinking about pedestrian, traffic patterns. The way that what was shown is that they have to go all the way around the U, where they're gonna travel east-west. That's a bit awkward for me to think as a pedestrian to go all the way around, a little bit weird. So as we're reimagining that new driveway, just think about what's natural for a pedestrian to go from there. And then the last point I had is around the outlet. I think we should be clear on whether or not it's a precondition for the project. And how dire the need it is, because I think, depending on what we land on in terms of ownership model, we should be clear on whether or not the city needs to add in. Ahead of it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mary Delia, 33 Elmira Ave. Just a couple things. I am a cyclist, and as a cyclist, if I was going to turn left from Low Street into this development, and I know there's a lot of accommodations for cyclists, I think there's something like 85 parking spaces or something for cyclists. That left turn lane would be a safety issue for me as a cyclist, because I would much prefer turning left to have the protection of that pocket than to be, doing traffic. Like from a cyclist perspective, it could absolutely be a safety measure for cyclists. The other thing, there's been a lot of discussion about mitigation, different impacts, and a lot of the mitigation strategies that are being contemplated are sort of infrastructure, like pedestrian crossings and such. The one thing that really hasn't been talked about as a mitigation measure is actually reducing the number of occupants. That didn't come up, I know, in design, if massing come up, density would come up. I hope that the ZBA will the concerns that I've been hearing is that 212 units feels like a lot for this area. And I know that there was an effort to impose zoning constraints on this area to 50 units. The Port Plaza Overlay District, 50 units per acre, which I think would take this somewhere between 130 and 150 units. I do think you're going to see more written comment about this particular issue, but I would encourage the ZBA to consider that perhaps that's a mitigation strategy, and that the massing and the density are too great and address the public concern.
Thank you. Yeah.
Good evening, Chairman and members of the ZBA. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. I agree with the last presenter or speaker rather on the density. I think that the density is huge. Oh, I'm sorry. Jim Farrell, 15 Richardson. But I do agree with the concern about this. So just around things of that magnitude in our state that don't even really improve projects large than the population. Now, I think everybody said that should never now. Another thing that we talked about design tonight and on design, I'm not sure if this falls more in the conservation category, but we talked about access, accessibility, and moving around the site and accessing the site, the safety, and that's a huge concern. Wow. Trying to take it to the next level. A lot of my perspective, it's a huge mass. A lot of the roof is self-facing. Is there any discussion at all of how energy that is going to be taken from the grid or restraint. Furthermore, what I would advocate is that the project falls to the standards of Project 2030. The challenge that was established by architecture to make the building industry carbon neutral. And I think the building needs to be carbon neutral. Not necessarily, but do I think that we should approach those standards of a project of this magnitude on the infrastructure of the area? Absolutely. So I would and it's appropriate now.
Mindset. Has its value. However, we can evolve in this solution. Thank you to my question. So no public space. No. There's kind of swing. This would be hard if I had time to do that. Any comment? Either there is no public space or some public amenity.
Well, yeah, I appreciate the comment. I think that's an area that we can focus on along with the peer review comments in our next iteration of that. And I think the two areas I should have noted them when I was just running through the peer review comments, the entry or these spaces are sort of transitional spaces, well, private, but that's certainly an area that the bench as was noted by the peer reviewer, to make a space that as a public space. There we can focus on, and I think the frontage along those streets as well. There's actually a pretty generous setback there to the screen of the parking garage is 45 feet. There's an area there that we could think about spaces there as well.
I note that all we can do is the access point. I don't know how many access parking places. Take the point, you're saying, 3 acre feet. But what? Would it be consideration to eliminate further I don't know, I just proved this out, trying to follow up.
I just want to clarify, so we didn't say there were excess parking spaces. What Mr. Myron said was that there would be an increase in the number of parking spaces left. So it's already hot top in for the shopping plaza. So because we narrowed the roadway in front of the building at the TEC, the shopping plaza gained a couple of parking spaces there. And then they gained, because there became more a perpendicular parking area in front, they got more space. They didn't create more pavement. And there's not an excess for this project. There's not. Okay, the space done. Plus is and then
No, I was asking.
That's, that's all.
I,
Both myself, so, anyway. What I heard.
Yeah, actual design response. Um, Members of the public. The very first meeting, that's why the unit number is the unit number. Not.
right. So it's sure. So the proposal is based upon what works in the area, matching the requirements of the 25% affordability and all of the financials for MHFA to approve the project. So it's 212 units because that's what works. That's what was approved by MHFA.
Other business. Liability of.
That's correct.
So I remember that from the first.
Thank you for asking.
I'm going to ask the applicant, their answer to that, but can I provide an urban design answer as well? If you look at the precedent that's shown on the screen right now, on the lower right or left, those buildings are probably 100 years old. And they likely have floor-to-floor heights of 12 feet or more. And so to think that this building in 2025 is too big, one only has to look down the street and realize in the historic core, you actually have quite a lot of density in a very small area. And if one were to, this isn't a possibility, but if you were to take away units, then you'd be losing out on other attributes that the project advocates for, like putting parking below grade. And then what would you do with the extra space? And maybe that space becomes residual or probably becomes service parking. So there's a really interesting calculus between density and the benefits that are derived from it, especially when you think about this area changing over time, and you actually do want to have more people living there. That's going to make a more pedestrian environment, and it's going to create a stronger place. But I'd like to advocate for density, irrespective of with a 40B, that's commensurate with the history.
Yeah, I have a couple questions. Another David Campbell. I just want to make sure I understand, because I'm counting my fingers. I thought you mentioned 5 things, and then your colleagues said 4. So I just kind of make sure you guys are going to keep working. Do you have any areas of disagreement?
Well, had I known they'd be so accommodating, I probably would have pushed the boundary a little. For example, it'd be great if a roof could be occupied. And if it had some transition spaces. Right now, that big roof that the gentleman mentioned, which is probably just could be occupied. You could get people out there. They could actually see out over the landscape. That would be pretty nice. But then, of course, that puts implications on the circulation and the cores and other things. But that I would push them on that a little bit.
And then, during public testimony, there was a question about sustainability or although it came in late, on our own, raised the issue of asking neighbors requesting notice. I make sure we're informed. Yeah, that's it. That's okay, and then the usual thing that everyone asks, I'm just not a big fan, but we move that or top solar and
Solar for sure, is that it's something that most projects, of course, it is a requirement again in the state building code. Energy code. Solar, right? That comes by default. And then it's usually an ongoing discussion about the solar panels actually implemented for construction or later down the road. But suffice to say, solar ready for sure. And a green roof on a wood frame building, usually not. I mean, we do have, yeah, we do have green roofs on the parking court. If you. There's a
knows everything. You're gonna be back. I know this. Sure. We'll get to it. Sure. Those are veneers.
Oh, no, it's older color veneers I get, but yeah, we're using,
Honest to God, one brick.
that's first.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yes.
And here for the information. We do solar.
Gov.
Okay. So with that, we will. And yeah, I'm going. And the second. And I vote.
It is very, and, with that, we'll go back to our agenda. The application for Mr. William Pike and I Street. This is an application for non-conformity. These conditions and approvals. And the existing. Manufacturing.
William Pike, as an owner of 10 High Street, thank you for persevering in. And we, wife and I recently purchased on Island in June. And basically, we want to put a deck out the back of the house. And there's a diagram that's not in a plane. Straightforward. Right in the diagram. On an architect. And the deck. Diagram in the opening, and that's where the deck is going to go. There's those 5 pole, no vegetation in the way. Anything, it's diamond piers, on tags. I don't think they have.
I mean, it's late at night, I just to have staff. You know, trying and looking at what's changing here, it's like the impact is that the side setback is gonna go 10 feet, is that it? Is that
Yes.
Yeah.
Hold on.
Yep, that's correct. Yep, open decks is an impact FAR.
That's,
And
that's all that's required.
right. Yeah, it's right here.
Anything further? We have any questions either? Ten I Street, CNC 25-29.
Yeah.
Yes. With the 3-foot upward extension.
I would like to go forward, except for my architect isn't here and my applicant isn't here, and I know you're all very disappointed. They left, and I've tried to get them. So I seem to think that they're snoozing or something. So sure, I'll go right through them and see how it goes. Sorry. So, in the record, we talked across the street, report, my applicant is, Newburyport Renovations LLC, George Hazeltine, and the, architect is Scott Brown, and that name just. Give the next slide. So, this is, to remove and reconstruct a single family home, to be constructed on an existing foundation with a couple of enlargements on the top. Few minutes. Construct a garage at the rear of the property. The property is currently pre-existing. It's in the R2 zoning district. It includes a single family Cape-style home right now. The R2 district has a minimum lot of 1,000. Frontage required is 90 feet, and this has 87.5. Finally, the front yard setback is at 25 feet, and the property has 24.1. So we're about 5.9 feet short. 0.9 feet short. The existing structure was constructed around 1950. Go to the next. So in addition to the fact that we're adding more than 500 square feet, we are doing an upward extension of that front yard setback. So the front wall is 6 feet higher. And that front yard setback is at one where 25-foot setback. So the applicant is proposing to remove the and construct a new home in the single family, freestanding rear. The existing structure includes about 1,555 square feet. That's the entire first floor and a part of the second. So what you're going to see is we're completing a full basement and a full second floor. So we will be increasing the size of the home, 3,540 square feet. And I'm going to explain that in a minute. The bulk of the home goes into the rear yard and doesn't overwhelm the front facade. So if you go to the site plan. So, here's the site plan, and you've got, Bolin Ave in the front. You can see the, structure in the middle of the site plan, the peach kind of color are the addition on the left-hand side. So currently there's a enclosed porch on the right-hand side, so that massing is shifting over to the left-hand side. You can see the peach color additional foundation in the back that's gonna be added, part of which is going to be a screened-in porch. That is an old site plan, because it has, oh, no, the pool's on it, so thank you. And then there we have the garage. One of the original submissions included a pool house, but we've removed the pool house. We have the garage, the pool. The accessory structure of the garage meets the requirements of the structure and meets the required setbacks. If you could go to the next. So here's the existing structure, and you see that little enclosed porch on the right-hand side. That's going to come down, and that massing is going to go to the left-hand side, and you can see the. So here's the proposed condition. What they do is they raise the height is a little bit taller, and they have a dormer in the front, and that you can see that porch on the right is gone. Show a different elevation, you'll see that bump out on the left-hand side. So here we have the existing structure, and as you can see on here, the roof height is 22 feet and 4 inches. You can see that Scott and Matt have made the Cape style, but not dramatically. And still obviously well done the 35 foot. And now you can see that sun porch on the left-hand side as opposed to the right-hand side of the structure. There's more green space on the left-hand side, plus of course we're putting the driveway, extending the driveway through on the right. Next slide. And so here's the right side elevation. Again, you can see where we're adding the massing to the back of the house. There's a bit of a roof down there now, but he's just reconstructing that roof, so it's a complete gable, and then he has, kind of the gable coming off the back. And then here's the left side elevation. Now you can see from the front, we've added that addition on the side, but again, you can see that gable end in the back that gets added. Oh, excuse me, that was the rear. Now this is the left-hand side. You can see that way walk out. You see again, you can see the massing. And to the back, which doesn't impact the front. So, next slide. And this is just the garage. So it's a standard garage. It's a two-car garage. And then above it's got some, some workout space or whatever. It is finished. Next slide, please. So the standard for a special permit is whether or not there's any new non-conformities. Here there are no non-conformities, and the extending that front yard, the height of that front yard setback to 6 feet taller. So that's the only increase in that non-conformity. Second criteria is that the size, scale, massing, volume, and location of the new additions will be considered substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood than the existing conditions. Here, if you can go to the next slide, the proposed structure is largely located within the same footprint as the existing structure. There are two modest extensions, one off the left side, as I indicated, and one in the rear. The major difference in the square footage is due to the full second floor, where there's only 348 square feet on the existing second floor story. On the on the new proposal, the revised square footage, as I mentioned, has an increase of 6 feet on that front facade. The elevations essentially match the form of elevation that exists today. The front facade, as I said, is a slight upward extension, that front setback non-conformity, and the existing condition is increased slightly by that 6-foot upward extension of that 24.1-foot front yard setback. Face of the front facade extends into the front yard in an upward direction. There's no impact on the feel and the massing of it on the street. The architect has taken care to keep the front facing facade similar in scale. It has moved the existing one-story enclosed porch, as I said, to the right, and more of the massing involved to the back of the house. But you'll note that the pitch of the house also remains very similar. Again, let's talk about the square footage, because the new home will take advantage of living space in the basement where none existed before, and the second floor. It was only 1,176 before, and now there will be 3,540. I think it's interesting to note that the existing footprint is 1,100 square feet. With the porch, you add 130 square feet. So the existing footprint of the house is 1,230. The proposed footprint is 1,368 plus the 124. So you're really looking at a few hundred square foot difference on the footprint itself in those two additions. So I think that when you look at the massing overall, it stays the same, even though the volume inside the house is now being fully taken advantage of. So really, what we also think is that it's similar in the changing neighborhood that is Bullen Avenue, and frankly, the eclectic style of houses that exist in Bullen Avenue. So the green square is this property at 9 Bullen. And I'm going to kind of walk you around the neighborhood a little bit. So if you go to the next slide, please. So here's 11 Bullen. So here's a small cape with a side addition, single car garage. Slide. And here's 10 Bullen. Structure, I don't want to mislead anybody. But this is a new structure that's on the floor. It's at this house. And that's at 10 Bullen. Next slide, please. Here's 8 Bullen. So you have an extended ranch with a 2-car garage. Next slide, please. And then we have a colonial right down the street. It's 7, 2 full stories, taller house than what's being today. But that's a colonial. So again, we have kind of an expanded cape, this much larger gable on this particular with that 2-car garage in the back. And then we have another colonial right down the street at 6 Bullen. Next slide. And this is actually the garage that's on the back of 6 Bullen that's on Myrtle Avenue. Next slide. And here we have another cape or cape with a not in the usual style. And then we have 21 colonial. And 28 Myrtle. So these are all behind the 10 Bullen neighborhood. Next slide. And 19 and 19 and a half Myrtle, extended capes, dormers. Next slide, please. 26 Myrtle. Not really exactly sure what that is. Next slide, please. Then another colonial at 24 Myrtle. Next slide. 15 to 17, expanded cape. 22 Myrtle, another cape with a attached garage, and 13 Myrtle. Kind of hard to see this one. Ranch. And 19 and 11. And 18 and 16. Again, now we're back down to the ranges. Then here is proposal. So we believe the design and the modest impact on the non-conforming front yard setback, the board can find that this proposed structure is not substantially more detrimental to the structure. It provides you letters 10 Bullen, 11 cutting mats in the back, 8 Bullen, and 7 Bullen. We have those in your. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Representative Wrigley. First, I want to acknowledge that as of this morning, plans for the design of the new house at 9. Kudos to Scott Brown. You're aware that the project has net setbacks, et cetera, except for tonight's special permit request for extension. However, we have concerns with the size and positioning of perhaps 2-car garage and livable space on the second story that will be built in the back right corner. Size and height of the garage, 30% of our starting. This is substantial consideration, considering we spend most of our living time backyard, backside of our house, and in the backyard and yard. And yeah, most importantly, we now have concerns about the loss of privacy. I printed the plans from the city website on September 25th. That version showed dormer without windows on the side facing our backyard. Reviewing the plans uploaded this morning shows that the second story dormer now has windows, northeast side facing, looking down into our yard and deck area. This will change and create substantial loss of privacy because of the height of the structure, as it is only 6 feet 1 inch from the property line. These windows will be directly into our backyard. We respectfully request a conditional approval of the permit that mitigates our real and substantial. Happy to provide the CV members photos and videos. Thank you for your time and consideration. Thank you.
Ken, thank you for your comments. I'm sorry, Scott's not here to compliment. I'm gonna do my best. So do you go to the garage plans, please? So I'm gonna go out on a limb here without my client. That's never a good plan. I don't, are you talking about the windows in the dorm? So I don't, the height of those windows, I don't know that people can actually see out of. I don't know that for a fact. So what if we, there's a glass that you can't. Oh, I know that they can put that in. So if we can either accomplish it by a condition that says that they'll have the glass that it's not tinted. I don't. It's like for sure, because I think they want the light up, but I think both and the light still comes in. I don't want to say that we're going to take away those windows because I don't know that.
So I appreciate like the ZBA to understand while you're describing this changing neighborhood, we understand, but this 2-car garage is literally being placed in the back corner of what really is a fairly small lot. I mean, it's a typical lot in this neighborhood where most of the houses were built in 1950. It's gonna have a huge impact on us. There's just no doubt, whether they're windows there or not. We're reasonable people, but it feels really big for us. And we know that it's within code, which is quite frankly disappointing, but that's just the way it is. So if, like my husband Andrew mentioned, there was one version that we noted September 25th. It had the dormers on both sides, but only windows on the other side facing their pool. So we're hopeful that perhaps they would consider going back to that version. I know that there are skylights so that they would have light, and that is facing the southwest, which is where the sun goes in the afternoon and then sets. So really, their sun be on the pool side anyway, not on our side. It would really be a view of our backyard. So, and this is livable space, so yeah, those are our concerns. Thank you.
Right, that's proposing that that you have a condition that, I would say you have a condition that's either frosted glass or no windows, either one up to the applicant. But I can't seem to make that.
I'm hearing.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
We could build the garage without, we could build the conforming garage, which it is. It's actually 15 feet tall, measured to the knee. If we weren't doing anything else, we could build a garage. Everything. So we can, my proposal is that you have a condition that the glass on the right-hand side is frosted in that dormer. It's the.
One, two.
All frosted. So if I could actually, I've a sleeping giant, and they are amenable to removing the windows in that dormer, not the side. Just
Still on the.
yes, that's correct. Headroom. Correct.
That's what we're down to. Okay.
Before we get too far, and I've heard, I think a different, you'd rather just something. Table, just for group. And I've not heard all these words a million times. You guys, this is a close table. So I know it's all late, where I understand, I just don't want to neighbors that have been here all night.
So there's in other words, there's a massing question.
There is one. This will be a big structure right on the edge of the yard.
I think, well, again, I don't know if votes, if you guys have the 4 votes, you should go ahead. But it seems to me it's soluble, and we're close. I mean, it's a good design for the building. Close. Still have an unhappy butter mass, and we don't have the architect. That's a guy.
Well, we've got not, can we go to my maps? Well, that's, right, that's the. So. You could blow up that area. So you can see the garage is in, if you could blow it up a little bit more. So the garage is located in the back corner, about 6 feet off, both the rear side.
Yeah, no, just to be clear, I'm not, I'm actually, unlike Larry, I wasn't talking about the location of the garage. Massive garage. And, you know, the applicant has examples in the neighborhood. Story garages. That's what we're wrestling with, and it's 11 o'clock at night. No.
So, Richard, just quickly, can I hear other comments, just in case, so I can take them back, so if I have to come back,
Yeah, is there anything else?
we're looking at a month later, so they would have time to.
Comments are, it's a big garage that is close to the neighbors. Something across the glass. It's just a
Any other comments? That's all I have is the garage and looking at this. And I want to commend the applicant for self. That was a lot. Right. I agree, thank you. Me, I'm down to the garage. Thank you.
Yes, it's all been completely conforming.
Yes.
It's not.
Yeah. We have the other comments. The motions that we.
Are there any? Or
No, I don't know, if you can bring that to my map. I think, it does not look. I think it's pretty there.
Yeah.
On the other side, you have a 20-foot high arborvitae. On the other side.
So not on the, not. Let me see.
A letter, motion's made. Second. Yes. Yes.
Can't vote. Who else make the motion? He's tired.
Yes. Wow, 10 minutes. I mean, really, just Karen? Oh, hey. Can I